Today I am going to talk to you about a chilling supernatural horror movie called Polaroid. The movie is set in a small American town, and the protagonist is a shy high schooler named Bird Fisher. Bird works at an antique shop and wants to study journalism. At school, she is reserved and often wears a scarf around her neck to hide the scar which she received in the fatal car accident that took her father's life. Some kids at school find it weird that she will not remove her scarf and call her Scarf Girl. Bird loves antique items, and her co-worker Tyler, who has a crush on her, finds an especially rare, old Polaroid camera and gives it as a gift to Bird. Bird loves the gift and notices that it has the initials RJS on it, who must have been the previous owner. Bird takes a photo of Tyler with it and notices there is a strange smudge in the background. Thinking nothing of it, Bird goes to a costume party dressed as Red Riding Hood with her best friend Casey. There, she meets Casey's friends Avery, Mina's boyfriend Devin, and Bird's crush Connor. Bird really struggles at the party to fit in because she is more of an introvert, but tries to socialize and offers to take a group photo of everyone with her Polaroid camera. For some reason, Bird experiences a very eerie feeling when she takes the group photo. Afterwards, Avery also takes a selfie with the camera and hands the photo to Bird when someone calls out that the police are at the door. Avery is more annoyed than worried until she yells up the stairs for Bird to come down right away. Once Bird reaches the top of the stairs, she realizes everyone is looking up at her strangely as the police want to see her back at the station. Bird is bewildered and worried, not sure why they want to see her. At the station, a local sheriff named Pembroke breaks the tragic news to Bird that Tyler had been murdered at the antique shop earlier that night and questions Bird on when she last saw him. Bird is totally shocked, and it doesn't sink in until she gets home that her co-worker and kind friend is gone. Bird can't sleep that night, and she cries sitting on her bed. She reaches over and looks at the photos she took of Tyler, Avery, and the group photo. Bizarrely, Bird notices that the smudge that looks like a silhouette of a man is gone from Tyler's photo and is now in the background on Avery's photo. Bird dismisses this strange occurrence as her imagining things from grief and promptly puts the photos back beside her bed and lies down to sleep. The next morning, Bird receives a phone call from Casey, breaking more tragic news that Avery passed away overnight, apparently falling down her stairs, and she was found with her head twisted all the way around in an unnatural position. Bird can't believe what she is hearing and is shocked again. She tells Casey that she has to go. Bird now has a feeling that the accidents are linked to the photos she took and the weird silhouette figure in the photos. She goes straight to the photo of Avery, and sure enough, the shadow has left her photo and is now hovering near the group photo of Mina, Devin, Casey, and Connor. With the realization of what is happening, Bird becomes angry and throws the camera against the wall trying to break it. However, when it hits the wall, it throws out a force field that knocks Bird off her feet. Once Bird arrives at school, she is determined to warn everyone who is in the group photo and try to figure out how to stop it. At first, when she tries to explain, Devin, Mina, and Casey think Bird is crazy, but Connor tells them to listen. Devin becomes so disturbed by Bird explaining about the moving shadow, and it murders whoever it stops near, that he impulsively grabs a lighter and sets the photo on fire. As the photo burns over a part of Mina, right in front of them, spontaneously combusts on her arm. Mina begins screaming in pain, and Devin tries to help her put out the fire that is covering her arm. However, no matter how hard Devin tries, he cannot put the fire out. Bird looks over at the photo burning and quickly realizes she must put the fire out on that. She does, and then the photo stops burning and restores itself like a freshly taken photo. Mina is taken to hospital for her burn to be treated. Meanwhile, Bird sits with Casey and Connor, trying to find a way to stop all of this. Connor asks Bird if there was anything else with the camera, any messages, and Bird tells them it was just the camera and its case. They ask where the case is, and Bird remembers it's still in the antique store. Bird decides to drive out there with Connor to get it, thinking that perhaps there are clues with the case. Bird retrieves the case from the store, but the entity is inside and tries to grab her. While Connor is waiting in the car, he looks at the group photo from the party again and realizes Bird is in it. When Bird is safe in the car, Connor breaks the news to her that she is also in the group photo. The reflection of her face is caught in the window behind them all. Bird and Connor head back to the hospital where Mina is. Devin enters Mina's room to see how she is. Mina smiles at Devin and is relieved to see him. The lights start to flicker in the room, and Devin lets Mina know he is going to go and get a nurse. Devin goes to the nurse's station, but cannot find anyone. The door behind the nurse's station is slightly ajar, and he walks up to it curiously. Meanwhile, Mina is all alone in her hospital room and starts to feel very uneasy. She can hear a strange breathing noise of something, and she is sure she knows it's the entity from the photos. The entity makes itself visible, and as the lights go dark it launches at Mina. Devin is seen by a nurse, and when he is asked what he is doing, he explains he was looking for staff and heads back to Mina's room to check on her. As soon as he enters the room, however, he knows something is not right because Mina is not in her bed and the medical equipment is no longer joined to her. He hesitantly walks further into the room and sees Mina's feet dangling. She is lifeless, hanging from some type of cord. Casey, Connor, and Bird rush to Devin's support. Bird walks up to comfort Devin, but he is angry at her, blaming her for all the tragedies that have happened. Bird apologizes, crying, and runs off to sit by herself in the hospital. Connor follows her and offers some comforting words. He knows it is not her fault and Devin doesn't mean what he is saying. Bird finally tells a little more about herself and her father's untimely demise and how she has blamed herself all these years because if she had just said yes to his request to show her something instead of impatiently wanting him to drive her to a party, the accident would have been avoided. Connor doesn't let Bird place the blame on herself and assures her that if her father was alive, he would have said all of this was none of her fault. Bird becomes inspired by Connor's words of strength and tells Connor that he is right and that her father would be busy finding out why all of this is happening right now. Bird is going to do the same. Together, Bird and Connor empty out the contents of the camera case and look for clues about its owner. Attached to the inside of the camera case, they find an old evidence tag from the local police station that states that the Polaroid camera was evidence in a homicide dated October 1974. Immediately, Bird and Connor head to the local library to find out about this homicide from the records room, which contains old newspaper clippings. It doesn't take them long to find a newspaper article about 3 teens that were abducted and murdered on the same date the evidence label had on it. The man responsible for the murders was a photography teacher at their Locust Harbor High School, where both Bird and Connor attend. His name was Roland Joseph Sable. Bird says his initials out loud, and then compares them to the initials on the camera case, and sure enough, they match RJS. They catch up with Devin and Casey at a cafe to tell them what they have found and discuss what it all means. Casey mentions that some items become cursed and pick up energy from terrible events, and this is what she thinks is happening with the camera. Bird brings a curious thing about the entity to the group's attention. The entity did not like heat or light, and she suggests that it acts like a photo does and cannot tolerate heat and light. Devin is on edge and tells everyone they need to do something. Bird shows Casey where Roland Sable used to live, and maybe a family member still owns it that they can talk to. Casey says there is someone who has lived there for decades, with a different surname. Devin starts to become overwhelmed with frustration and threatens to smash the camera. Connor tries to intervene, and they begin to shout at each other until they accidentally make the camera take a photo, and it is of Devin. Devin becomes even more irate and goes to throw the camera, but Casey stabs Devin's hand with a pencil in the photo that was just taken to stop him. In agony, Devin clutches his hand as a hole is seen right through his palm. Devin starts to lash out at Casey until a police officer tries to calm him, and in reaction Devin hits the officer in the face. Devin is taken into custody overnight. The sheriff tries to excuse their behavior away by the back-to-back tragedies they have faced, but Connor and Bird try to explain it as supernatural and is to do with the camera having an entity. But of course, the sheriff dismisses this idea as crazy. Bird and Connor leave the station and go to Roland Sable's old house to talk to the lady who lives there. It turns out she changed her surname from Sable many years ago. When they arrive, Mrs. Sable is extremely wary of them, but Bird shows her the camera and case and asks if it was her husband. Mrs. Sable corrects them that it was her daughter's, Rebecca Sable. Bird asks if they can come in to talk to her, and she lets them in. Mrs. Sable shows them her daughter's room and then explains what happened to her. She passed away many years ago, after she was severely and continuously bullied by other students at high school when they passed around inappropriate photos of her that they found. As a result, her father, Mrs. Sable's husband, became extremely angry and resentful, and he promised to finish all of the bullies himself for what they had done to his daughter. He succeeded in kidnapping them, taking them to his dark room and ending 2 of the bullies, but one got away when police officers stormed his dark room and shot and ended his life. He fell into his dark room developing tank, holding the camera when he passed away. Mrs. Sable handed them the photo of the bully who got away, out of a photo album. With this photo in hand, Bird has a plan to find out who this person is by going to the high school and looking at the yearbook of 1974 to see who this other student could be. Perhaps by finding him, they can bring closure and end this cycle. They dive through the records and get out the 1974 yearbook, and are shocked to find that the photo of the missing bully is Sheriff Pembroke himself. Just as they are processing this, Sheriff Pembroke arrives, ready to arrest them both for trespassing on high school grounds at night, and tells them all they are taking the haunted camera idea way too far, and they shouldn't have bothered the Sable woman. Connor confronts Sheriff Pembroke and challenges him, saying he is only worried about what Mrs. Sable told them. Sheriff Pembroke becomes frustrated and tells them Mrs. Sable is lying, and they have the situation all wrong. He explains that he and the other 2 classmates never once picked on Rebecca. On the contrary, they were trying to save her from her father. He was taking photos of her, not anyone else. And if they checked the dates, they would see that Rebecca after the murders, not before. Bird and Connor start to realize the great mistake in judgment they had cast on Sheriff Pembroke. The entity appears near Sheriff Pembroke after taking a photo of him and leans down to pick up his photo. It swiftly rips the photo in half, which causes Sheriff Pembroke to be brutally ripped in half down the middle before their eyes. They all look on in horror and run from the entity. Bird walks with Casey to the changing rooms and has an idea that will keep them safe by sitting in the shower and turning on the water and the heat. The entity approaches them, but cannot step into the water or steam. It eventually disappears from them to look for Connor. Bird leaves Casey in the shower and assures her she will be safe. Bird looks for Connor and finds him hiding in a corridor. She has an idea and tells him they must get the camera. They run together down the hall and find the camera, and Bird picks it up. They also hear the entity nearby. The entity grabs Connor and drags him away from Bird. Bird turns around and then takes a selfie with the Polaroid to jump its shadow to her. Connor yells out to warn Bird that he is coming back to her. Bird lures the entity down into the dark room. It follows her, and she loses the camera for a few minutes, but picks it up again. It grabs her by the neck and lifts her up so she can't breathe, but Bird has the camera ready and manages to take a photo of him. It immediately puts Bird back down and then hits her across the face, sending the camera flying across the floor and knocking Bird on her back. However, Bird lifts her head up to the entity with a smirk as she has the photo of him with her 2 fingers caught in the frame in her hand. She crumples the photo up as hard as she can, and the entity is broken and twisted in pain at the same time. Because Bird's fingers were captured in the photo, her fingers break as she squeezes the photo, but she puts up with the pain. The problem is, when she uncrunches the photo, the entity starts to regain his strength. She knows what she must do now to finish the entity off for good. Bird grabs a lighter and sets the photo alight, and the entity is burned until it disintegrates for good. Exhausted and in pain, Bird breathes a sigh of relief, knowing it is all over. Bird finds Connor and Casey and hugs them, telling them the entity is gone forever and the past is laid to rest.